From San Antonio, Texas, home of the Alamo, the Riverwalk, and the World Heritage San Antonio Missions, this is the Exit Planning Coach podcast with John F. Dini. Designed to help advisors who work with business owners, John talks with top professionals in the exit planning field about best practices, marketing tips, and how to be more effective when working with owners. Now, here's John F. Dini.
Welcome to the Exit Planning Coach podcast. Thanks for tuning in today, and I want to welcome John Leonetti. He's the third in our founder series. We've had the founder of the Exit Planning Institute and the founder of the Business Enterprise Institute, and John is the founder and CEO of the International Exit Planning Association. He's the author of Exiting Your Business, Protecting Your Wealth, a strategic guide for owners and their advisors. So John has been doing this for 18 years. He served as a principal, a manager, a transactional advisor, a legal advisor, and a financial advisor to privately held businesses for all that time. We're going to find out what got him involved. As far as credentials, John earned his law degree from Suffolk University and is recovering. He's a non-practicing attorney in good standing with the state of Massachusetts, and along with his law degree, he has a master's degree in finance from Suffolk Sawyer School of Management and holds a BS in finance from Providence College. Welcome, John. So thrilled to have you on.
Thanks, John. I appreciate being here. Appreciate the opportunity.
And in the last couple of years, we've become very friendly. I've gotten my CBEC, the certification from the IEPA, and attended my first conference in October, and it was a blast and very, very high level and informative. And I'm sure we're going to talk about how IEPA is a little bit different from the other organizations in this business. But tell me, let's go back to school. You got out of school. What was the first thing you did when you got your law degree? Or did you get your master's first and then the law? How did that work?
We go back in time. I got my undergrad from Providence College, and my dad approached me a few months before graduation and said that he was striking out on his own in the textile business. And I there for a couple of reasons, I said, yeah, let me help you with your new venture. He had been working for another small firm where he was top salesperson for many years. They wouldn't give him a partnership, so he decided to strike out on his own. It's noteworthy to mention that he did that as a second career after 14 years in the New York Police Department, and he retired early. And as a second career, he got into sales and business, and turns out as a cop, he became a pretty good entrepreneur. So I joined him when he was not even a year out on his own. And through 5 years, I went to work for him and learned small business, eventually going back to law and finance, but not before I got a real firsthand experience of what it was to start and grow not only a small business, but a family business, which has its own layer of complexity when you mix business and family.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's neat. I didn't know you had a PD background. My father-in-law was a captain of detectives.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We grew up in it. I grew up in New York. I was born in Brooklyn, New York. He was a Brooklyn cop. He and my mom were both children of direct immigrants who grew up in Brooklyn, during those days of the Brooklyn Dodgers and the nostalgia associated with, the burgeoning suburbs on Long Island and the metropolis areas of Brooklyn and the boroughs and Manhattan, as the markets and America was really forming during post-World War II. They were a big part of all of that, and we moved out to Long Island. He retired early, as I mentioned, and went into business. So he was able to find a second career that was very meaningful for him. And it was right at the same time I was finishing up college, so I was able to join him.
So did you get your advanced degrees while you were working in the family business?
No, it was after. So I spent 5 years working with him. And some of those years I was working part-time towards the end. But through my 20s, I went straight into the entrepreneurial end of starting a new venture with my dad, who had a good reputation and very good skill set. So I was able to be a mentee to him. There was no formal training. We were in Midtown Manhattan. So it was an industry that's very interesting, John. I won't go off on too many tangents because we're going to keep this short. But back then, Ross Perot was running for president, talking about the big sucking sound of NAFTA. And the textile industry was right a big part of that as it was being offshored to Mexico and then eventually to India, Pakistan, China, and other places that could manufacture, at a much lower cost. So not only was I joining an entrepreneurial venture, but it was in an industry that at the time, America had sort of written off in favor of other high-tech industries where the thinking at the time was if you'd lost a bit of the manufacturing base, it wouldn't hollow out America, and that turned out a little bit differently. So I participated in that declining industry, which created different challenges that early in my career added to new business challenge, family challenge, industry challenge. Eventually, the industry was not for me when I met my wife, and I moved on to law school and the master's in finance, but not before I got a really deep experience in family business. And that was the origin of my interest. Is I went into M&A after that, but what was really interesting to me as I was learning how to sell companies, entering the joint degree program, was that throughout the entire time that I worked for my dad, we never once talked about selling the business. But we had countless conversations about what the future would look like, and could I get married and raise a family with this business against the backdrop of the industry and everything else? Is it something I could rely upon, and how and when would that succession planning happen? And what I found was all of our advisors that we brought in knew very little about the topic. They knew a lot about how to set up a retirement plan to fund it, or how to sell us some insurance in case my dad died prematurely. Or the accountant tried to help us, but I found it incredibly odd that there wasn't a service to help businesses like ours who didn't want to sell but wanted to transition internally. And that's where the seeds were planted for, just something was wrong there, that in my view, something was missing in the marketplace.
So you said, and by the way, I remember that well. My father was a salesman, and I remember driving through the garment district, where you had to weave your way through the guys with the dress racks,
Oh, yeah.
pushing them across the street and stuff. It was an incredible time in New York. Um, so you get your advanced degrees, and you said I went into M&A for somebody else, or you went out on your own immediately, or how did that start?
So I wanted to get caught up. I felt like I lost a few years of my career. I didn't understand or appreciate at the time how much I had learned. So I went back to law school and I got a joint degree with finance. And after the first year, I moved into the evening school so I could work during the day. And I was able to secure employment with a boutique M&A firm. And that's where I started learning the M&A business. And I concentrated all of my studies in law and finance on business sale transactions and capital markets and whatnot. I was able to get a couple of years experience working for a firm that also, very interestingly, was trying to shed their identity as a business broker and go upmarket to a lower middle market M&A firm. In pursuit of that goal, they hired a lot of students out of the top universities in the Boston area, the Harvards, the MITs, and the like. They were able to take me because I had the joint degree, even though Suffolk wasn't arguably not a top tier school, but 2 degrees and some sales experience got me the job. And I started learning the M&A business from the sell side within the lower middle market from some guys who had a good skill set, but arguably had most of their experience in the lower, Main Street businesses. So
Hmm.
I got a really good immersion in another small business. It helped that I was comfortable in a small business because I had worked for my dad in a very small business.
So from there, did you go out on your own in the M&A world or,
Yeah,
yeah.
so I had a few years experience, and in a fateful on a fateful day, I went in to see the owner. I had an agreement that I would study for the bar exam and then I would come on full time. We had negotiated an employment agreement and salary and signed it. What made that day fateful was he told me that he wasn't able to honor the agreement because there was a change in the marketplace. And that was fair enough about a change. I thought it was patently unfair that our agreement was changing. They wanted me to work while I studied for the bar. I said that was non-negotiable. And they told me that my employment was going to stop if that's how I felt. In that owner's defense, a few months later, 9/11 hit. And in fact, he was somewhat, I probably end up in the same spot
Yeah.
regardless. So, no big deal. But yeah, I wound up leaving there to study for the bar. And in the first week of October, a month after 9/11, I was able to get a job with Merrill Lynch on the retail investment side. The thinking there was any port in a storm. My girls were babies. Two of my four children were born then, both girls. And I was able to get a job at Merrill Lynch, and I told the manager with my M&A and entrepreneurial experience, I would begin working with business owners to help them sell, and that's how I would gather assets to grow my practice. He thought it was very novel. He gave me the job. Interestingly, along my journey, the week after I got the job, front page of the Wall Street Journal, Merrill Lynch lays off 10,000, puts a hiring freeze, right? So my journey was kind of interesting. I made it onto the retail side, working with small business owners in a number of different ways, and that's where I saw the personal side of planning. And I stayed there, built a practice, and eventually sold it. For the whole term was about 5, 6 years. But that's really where I started developing the exit planning concepts. Was in that retail environment, talking to business owners about their illiquid wealth, not just the liquid wealth that we charge
Hmm.
management fees for.
Yeah, and a term you really taught me. I knew businesses weren't liquid, but I never thought of them as an illiquid asset until I started working with you.
Yeah.
Um, so when did the book happen?
So I was building the wealth management practice from 2001. I made stops. I started at Merrill Lynch, moved over to Smith Barney, and went independent with Raymond James, all within 5 years. Um, in 2007, I had started drafting the concepts that I was working around for the exit planning. I hired a coach. He said, you should write a book. You should start a process, build a process. I did that. And I was fortunate enough to have Wiley and Sons take me up as a first-time author. So when my investment firm at Raymond James found out I was going to publish a book, for those listening who understand the compliance department or the business prevention department, they were quick to let me know that
The
that
Business
wasn't.
Prevention Department. That's
There you
great.
go.
Yeah.
They called me up, and very nice compliance manager. I mean that sincerely. He was a very, very good guy, real gentleman. He flew up and said, look, maybe you should really think about what you want to do. And I said, that's good advice. I'm not going to be upset that you recruited me knowing all this. I'm going to just accept the fact that uh, maybe I need to go in a different direction. And Raymond James was very good. They helped me at the time. Now they're a very well-developed, processes for selling your wealth management business. In 2007, there wasn't. Despite that, they helped me find a buyer within the Raymond James network. I was able to effect that sale in March of '08. I was able to get the wire transfer for the value, and there was some structure, but I was able to use that to fund the build out of what now really was my passion, which is the exit planning and the exit planning business and the IEPA that you mentioned.
Right. Well, and going to take a quick break and come back to that, the foundation of the IEPA. And by the way, let me throw in a plug for myself here. In my book, Your Exit Map, I interviewed Tom James.
Oh,
And
okay.
and Tom said then that the number one problem that Raymond James had was transitioning practices.
Well, we'll
And
talk a little bit more about that after the break.
okay. All right, we'll be right back after a quick word to pay for the podcast, and I'll come back to John Leonetti and the International Exit Planning Association.
How would your practice survive if only 25% of your clients were happy with your work? How many referrals would you get? Would you advertise that success rate? Over the last decade, both the Exit Planning Institute and PwC have surveyed owners and found that 75% were profoundly unhappy a year after their exits. In 10 years, the exit planning industry has done little to fix this issue. Business owners need purpose, direction, and activity after exiting. Planning for that starts with your very first coaching conversation. We work with advisors who believe that clients should be happy after exiting. Exit Map is a structured discovery process that helps you have deeper conversations about client options, objectives, and life after the business. We help you launch better transitions. Take a test drive at exitmap.com.
Okay, welcome back to the Exit Planning Coach podcast. I'm with John Leonetti, the founder of the International Exit Planning Association. And John, during the break, you told me that you had a story about Tom James. So let's pick up where we left off.
I did. I had moved my wealth management practice over to Raymond James specifically because they had a mid-market business, right? So lower mid-market, as you know, John, is roughly 5 or 10 million in value, up to 100 or so million, maybe a little higher depending on how you count. Then there's businesses valued 100 million to $1 billion. That's where Raymond James had research and were market makers for IPOs and secondaries for businesses those size. And then you have the bulge bracket, which is the Smith Barneys and Merrill Lynch's that I was with that are doing, billion plus IPOs. So I chose Raymond James because they had investment banking in the middle mid-market that had capabilities that I felt as my practice grew, I could be a part of and refer business over to the investment bank. So I went down, sat with them, talked about what I was doing. The president at the time, Chet Helk, was very interested in the exit planning that I was doing. They offered me a job to work there. They walked me down the hall. I met Tom James and I said, well, what does it look like if I give up my practice and come work here? I have a house and I have a 4-bedroom house and a family up in Massachusetts. He said, well, you come down here, you get a bigger 4-bedroom house and you live down here and you work for us. And I said, I don't think that's where my future is. I'm flattered with the offer, but at that point, I had not yet sold the practice, and I went on to sell it and then build the IEPA independent of any infrastructure or corporate, hierarchy. I thought I needed the freedom to do that. So with the money in the bank from the sale of the wealth management business, I was off and running with the IEPA.
Oh, okay. So you sell your practice, you go out on your own, you publish the book, you found a publisher, which having done self-published 4 books, I'm envious. Um, and you start, well, at the time it was Pinnacle, right?
No, the original name was
Yeah.
Pinnacle Equity Solutions.
Hmm.
The concept was we're creating solutions for the equity. So I needed some initial name. And inside the book, I talk about Sir Edmund Hillary being the first not to get to the top of Mount Everest, but the first to survive the descent. The pinnacle for business owners to get to the top is pretty common, depending on how a business owner defines the top. it's an interesting analogy when you think about surviving the descent. Sir Edmund Hillary is the first one to live to tell about reaching the pinnacle, but he wasn't the first one to reach it. There are many, as you know, frozen bodies still on Mount Everest that did not survive the descent, nor the ascent as well, for that matter. And when I think about business owners who succeeded in business, the path forward is one that most of us can relate to. Human life is designed around growth, advancement, expansion. So climbing a mountain is analogous to building a business. It's challenging, but you keep moving forward, you keep moving upward, you carry the weight with you, and eventually you define the pinnacle and you reach it. What was less known and continues to be less known, as you know, John, is how to survive the descent, how to monetize that asset, how to find a fulfilling life beyond it, how to handle legacy issues, and how to transition the company to new ownership. Those concepts, very similar to what I was facing when I worked for my father, were still very poorly known. And as you know, John, many, many famous stories are told about families losing the wealth,
Sure.
you know, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations, right? First generation earns it, second generation tries to maintain it, third generation loses it. It's pretty common. So exiting your business, protecting your wealth was about not only getting out, but helping business owners assure that what they had worked for decades to achieve was protected for legacy issues and for them to have freedom in their lives, which I think is a worthy goal. I would never begrudge a business owner who enjoys working to keep doing so, but there's something to be said for having freedom being the reward for creating a successful, profitable, and valuable business. So we were pursuing those goals, and of course, having stayed in the personal side of planning on the wealth management, vis-a-vis the change in market conditions foisted upon us by 9/11, I had a good grounding in that side of the business to complement the corporate finance and legal side and entrepreneurial side. So I had this serendipitous route through life that took me to building out the Pinnacle Equity Solutions, and then eventually we rebranded it because it wasn't intuitive. The International Exit Planning Association is a little more suggestive of what we do.
Yeah. Well, and actually, and we agree. I mean, in Exit Map, we talk, we're primarily structured around developing that personal vision for a business owner. And that's really where we hit it off first was our common interest in having owners. You talk about the descent, we talk about life after the business, but having a satisfying exit, not just a profitable exit. And you still have 2 businesses. I mean, you still have Beacon Hill Equity Partners. You're still involved in the M&A world. But what made you decide to start teaching exit planning as a methodology to other people?
Well, I can't say it was a very conscious decision because the next market condition that was foisted upon us was the global financial crisis in 2008.
Mm-hmm.
So if we go back to the timeline, I sold my wealth management practice in March of 2008. In October 6th of 2008, my book came out, and I thought, this is it. I've got a tiger by the tail. By the end of October, Lehman Brothers had fallen apart and the global financial crisis had begun.
You're just a master of timing.
I tell
Clearly.
you. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. None of it felt fortunate at the time, I can assure you. But I hired a coach. I had a coach to help me with the book and start thinking through the concepts for a training program. And the catalyst was October of 2008. I had this book, I had a message, I had passion, I had freedom, I had money in the account, I knew what I wanted to do. And by the luck of the global financial crisis, there was no consulting or sell side work for a couple of years, as most businesses were in triage. So what do you do when you have time, freedom, money? You go build a training company, I guess, based on the principles in the book. We worked so hard for 2 years straight on Pinnacle or the IEPA Truth be told, I told the team, I'm not interested in doing a certification. And eventually I came around to it. My real interest was supporting advisors and educating business owners on how to implement successful exits. That's really all I wanted to do. Over time, my thinking developed, and a few years in, I listened to our committee who said certification is a recognized way of consuming education and promoting yourself in the marketplace. So a few years in, we came up with the Certified Business Exit Consultant designation, and then we were off and running. As I was saying, we worked so hard at it. The business is still going 18 years later, even though, as you mentioned, I share my time as a practitioner doing the planning and consulting and business sales, very similar to you.
Mm-hmm.
But along the way, what we decided to do is, and by the way, you not only got the CBEC, you're the first and only person I'm aware of to have all three designations, which is an interesting side note worth mentioning.
Just incorrigible. Nothing I can do about it.
And, as you know, because you went through it and earned it, you have to submit a plan to get designated, to get certified. And
Right.
that's a pretty high bar. So we have a smaller membership.
Yeah. And you are the only certification that requires that.
Yeah. And that's fine. And many people told me that's really going to slow down your growth. But that's not the question that I was asking. I wasn't asking how fast can we grow. I was asking how do we solve the problem in the market? And the problem in the market wasn't that professional advisors didn't have enough choices for professional designations. Okay, if I was trying to solve for that problem, I might be interested in selling more certifications. The problem in the market is the same problem my father and I had. It was the problem 30 years ago. It's the same problem today. Owners don't have good resources or awareness of how to effect a successful exit or transfer of their business. That's the problem. So I wanted to build a company that helped solve the problem. And along the way, we also happen to certify people and build an association type of business to support them. And that's been the guiding light, and some of the core values of the business are embedded in that philosophy. So we end up with a smaller organization, but I think a very impactful group of what we call exit doers. And I value the exit talkers. I value and appreciate folks who don't want to write exit plans and don't want to charge the fees and don't want to do the depth, and they just want better relationships with business owners. But we wanted to occupy the end of the market that was solving the problems. And I think we've achieved that, albeit a much smaller organization, but a very impactful one.
It is. It is. It's so impressive. There's obviously a big difference. And I think, having gone to your conference in October and having gone to EPI's, which had 10x the attendees, constantly talking to people saying, I'm not sure what I want to do, but I know I don't want to give business advice, Um, so I will, this has been great, really, and I've learned some things about you that I did not know. We have even more in common besides being just two Italians from the New York area than I thought. But I always finish up all the interviews with one question. New person. I'm a financial advisor. I'm a business broker. I'm an insurance broker. I'm a CPA, and I want to get into exit planning. I've decided to hang out a shingle and help people with exit planning. I think it's important. What is your advice to a brand new exit planner to embark on building a practice, not just from the marketing standpoint? I'm talking about from the skills and ability standpoint. What would your advice be for them as a logical first step?
A new advisor
Yes.
with business, building a practice with business owners, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So my first advice is you gain confidence through a certain level of competency. Okay,
Hmm.
confidence, competence, they sound familiar, they're intricately related, right? So you have to have some competency so that you have that confidence, so that the person who's sitting across the desk or the table or the Zoom meeting from you feels good, because trust is essential in choosing advisors. To develop that competency, you would want to learn some things that are specific to the market you're speaking to. For business owners, it's exit planning is an umbrella concept that's encompassing of many topics, and you can take a course of study in exit planning and become familiar with the challenges that business owners face, the how businesses are valued, what challenges business owners face when their identity is tied to their business, and so on and so forth. And if you have that base of knowledge, you can then engage with the owners and choose the level that you want to try to solve problems at. If you want to try to solve complex problems, I would submit to you that we have a good program that's been around a long time, that has a good track record of success in helping our advisors monetize the training through good planning fees. If you want to do a lower version of engaging with business owners, you don't have to take our program. There's other programs out there. You mentioned the SEPA program from EPI.
Hmm.
I read they added 2,000 SEPAs last year. I think it's awesome. And if advisors are interested in that course of study, they can compare the programs. I think any one of them is going to serve the advisor very well. There's also the BEI program that we mentioned at the beginning with John Brown's organization. I think that's a good course of study. And if that advisor just thinks about relating to their wannabe customer, their wannabe client, the business owner, then it's sort of incumbent on you to learn what you can to relate to that person's issues and be in a position to help address them, in addition to the financial products and services and solutions that the industry offers. The solutions and services offered by the industry are not right on point with business owners' concerns, because as we talked about, most of the wealth of a business owner is illiquid in their business, not liquid yet. So if you want to be in this market, it's a challenging market, but it is rewarding on multiple levels, not the least of which is when you go solve problems of this type for business owners, not only is the compensation, very, very favorable, but you become a transformative factor in the life of this entrepreneur who
That is very true.
sacrificed so much to
Absolutely.
get to where they are.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, and it's wonderful. As I say in some of our training materials, when you're finished with doing a proper exit plan, you've not only affected an individual and his family, but his employees and his employees' families. In some cases, it could be thousands of people that are impacted by what you've done to help this person. It's
Yeah.
it's really it's one of the most rewarding things I've ever done, and
And John, I
certainly
left
enjoy it.
out of that lineup of service providers the exit map tools,
Oh,
which can
thank you.
help you effectively engage, with the owner.
Yeah.
And the
Mhm.
advisors can look at other tools and services that are out there as well. But to your point, John, I think that I've been able to surround myself with a smaller group of advisors, under 300, but a passionate group where we all share the stories of the impact we've had. And if we keep along that path of impact, then we're going to move the needle on how business owners affect the transition of their companies and the protection of their wealth. It's inevitable. And all of the advisors who are getting trained and becoming more aware are helping to move that needle no matter what level they participate at, because at a minimum, they're raising awareness in the marketplace of the need. And once we get to the place where business owners understand the service exists and they can access it, then we'll really start making a holistic difference across the market. And that's the mission and vision for the IEPA.
Well, And we buy into that wholeheartedly, and we better get on the stick, or they better get on the stick, because I just not a week ago I had to go into Census Bureau and check the numbers again, and we still have 2.5 million owners who are 60 years old or older, and they better figure it out relatively soon. John, it's
We're
been a
here.
pleasure.
Yep.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. I had a good time, and I know you had to fit us in between a couple of trips, and safe travels. Have
Thank
a
you,
good one.
John. It was a pleasure to be here. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Okay, thanks a lot, John. Take care.
Thank you.